The griffins landed heavily, sending flurries of dust up into the air as their wings beat low to the ground. They breathed fast, their journey long and finally over. Sharm and the others climbed down off their backs and looked around. They had landed a short distance from Halar in Nagrand. They had planned to fly as far as they could towards Shadowmoon Valley, but their griffins had become weary and required a well-deserved rest. Sharm smiled as she watched them stepping into the nearby river, ruffling their feathers and cooling off. She took the lead and began crossing over one of the 4 bridges leading into Halar. It was another beautiful summer's day in Nagrand. The wind blew softly and smelled earthy and rich. It was difficult to believe that the wet and drizzly Zangarmarsh lay just over the distant mountains of Nagrand. Behind her she could hear a Thenist quietly complaining to Radian about something or other. Sharm stepped onto the floating island of Halar with a disconcerted feeling. It was as though she expected to feel the island move under her weight, but it floated steadily in the air. A male Draenei eyed a Thenist and Radian dangerously as they approached. There was something different about this Draenei. He looked mutated. His eyes followed Sharm's associates as they perused around him. "What business do you have here?" questioned the Draenei in a deep and slow voice. He asked the question mainly to a Thenist and Radian. Radian stepped forward. "We mean no harm," he answered calmly. "We just need some supplies, and then we will be on our way." The Draenei, Lakoa, continued to watch Radian's face for a good few seconds before replying. "It is not in my nature to host your kind." His hood rippled in the breeze. Sharm held her breath. This could get nasty. "You have until sundown." Lakoa turned his back on them slowly before moving into the shade of the building and settling. Sharm released her breath and nodded to the others. Silently, they began making their way around the small island of Halar, preparing for their journey into Shadowmoon Valley. The first bomb dropped down right beside a Thenist. It exploded into a mass of fire and shrapnel, sending a Thenist lurching backwards into a food stall. Sendri, the owner, searched the sky frantically whilst gathering up her things and trying to push a Thenist to his feet. "Time for you to fight now, Blood Elf," she murmured to him, "and we are not on the same side." A Thenist rose to his feet and followed her gaze to the sky. 3 wyverns circled above, flying directly beneath the sun. They cast ominous shadows on the ground as they circled and swept the area. Radian came rushing across from the other side of the island, narrowly dodging another bomb that exploded right behind him. The atmosphere had grown dark in Halar, and only Lakoa stood bravely in the open, looking up into the sky. A Thenist scouted the area and spotted Sharm, Crowin and Parantaya huddled inside one of the buildings, talking nervously amongst themselves. A laugh pealed out into the air high above them, followed by the screech of a wyvern. The hunter atop it leant out onto its wing, sending it swooping downwards towards Halar. The other 2 riders followed. They landed side by side. A Thenist could see a row of bombs strapped to the side of the wyverns' bodies. "Hello again," spoke the hunter dangerously. The other 2 riders smiled wickedly. Paladin and priest. The priest activated his shadow form, turning himself and the wyvern into a cloak of dark purple and blue. Sharm moved out from the shelter of the building and stood next to Lakoa, who had his eyes narrowed on the 3 menaces. "You," she said darkly. Gigi dropped down from her wyvern. "What can I say?" she grinned. "I missed you." She looked across to Parantaya. "Ah, I see you managed to survive your last ordeal." Parantaya stepped out of the shadows and moved to the other side of Lakoa. "And now I am stronger than ever," she replied, staring at Gigi defiantly. Gigi laughed. "Well, good for you. Let me introduce you." She gestured at her comrades. Romire and Keruz. They've been tracking you for days, and now, here we are. She twirled lightly on her heel. Shall we? Sharm raised her hands in front of her. We don't have to do this. Gigi placed her emerald eyes on Sharm as she remounted her wyvern. Oh yes, we do. Surprisingly, the first attack was made by Parantaya. She roared as she leapt forward towards Gigi's mount. The wyvern screamed and tried to beat her away, but Parantaya was nimble. Sharm watched as she climbed up and dug her knees into the saddle to stable herself. Gigi reeled and pulled the reins hard. The wyvern flung itself into the sky in a frantic state as Gigi and Parantaya began struggling for control. Raiden charged at Romire, whilst Keruz made a swift retreat into the sky. He circled the island before throwing a bomb down onto one of the huts. It ignited furiously, roaring into the sky. Romire was stunned by Raiden's charge and was helpless as Raiden grabbed him and threw him onto the ground. Lokar moved to him and peered down into his face with sinister eyes. Up above, Sharm could see the silhouettes of Gigi and Parantaya as they fought for the mount. Parantaya's weapon gleamed brightly in the sunlight. Crowen swept past the fallen Romire and jumped onto the confused wyvern. With a shout, he commanded the beast into the air and began pursuit of the priest. The wyvern's wings pounded the air powerfully, closing the distance between Crowen and Keruz swiftly. Keruz looked over his shoulder at the fast advancing Crowen. He had one bomb left and he grabbed it nervously before launching it towards Crowen. Crowen manoeuvred quickly, the bomb flying past him and landing safely in the deep waters below Halar. He retrieved his throwing axes from his pocket and flung one hastily at Keruz. It whistled as it pierced through the air and made contact with the wyvern's wing. The wyvern dropped from the air, its coordination completely out of balance. Keruz made a hasty decision to abandon his mount and cast Levitate to slowly descend to the burning ground below. Sharm was waiting for him. His silhouette descended painfully slow before he landed and tried to make a run for it. Sharm cast Death Coil and smirked as he began running around completely disorientated. With the flick of her hand, she teleported in front of him and waited for him to regain his senses. He turned to look at her sheepishly before she knocked him out with Shadow Fury. A body slammed down beside Sharm. It was Gigi. She groaned and rolled over onto her back, eyes squeezed shut. Sharm knelt beside her and removed her bow. Gigi sat up slowly, arms clasped around her chest. You won't, she breathed. You won't get away with this. She stumbled to her feet and hobbled to the nearby hut, leaning heavily against its wall. Athenis and Raiden rushed to Sharm's side, weapons ready. Let her go, Sharm said softly. Athenis and Raiden looked at her confused. They watched as Gigi painfully camouflaged herself into the surroundings, her footsteps appearing in the charred earth as she made her way out of Halar. Crowen and Parantaya landed gracefully beside Raiden and looked at the bodies of Keruz and Romire. They ain't gonna be happy when they come to, said Crowen. Sharm nodded. We'll let the guards decide how to deal with them. Parantaya looked into the distance and spoke softly. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing her again. She turned to Sharm. You have her bow, and she'll be wanting that back.